Back in February, I needed to know how much each state and the District of Columbia received in bipartisan infrastructure law funding that was administered by the Federal Railroad Administration. Unfortunately, this data was not already compiled into a spreadsheet and rather was listed in a half dozen or so PDFs. So I spent 2 days copying the almost 500 individual awards from the PDFs and pasting them into a spreadsheet so that the data could be easily analyzed. Hooray, pivot tables. So I'm going to give an overview of the various grant programs, followed by a summary of the bottom 10 and top 10 states. This is the official graphic from the Federal Railroad Administration showing the breakdown of the $66 billion in rail funding appropriated by the bipartisan infrastructure law. However, as of January 2025, only $28 billion has been awarded, and I made this graphic showing what has been awarded by the Federal Railroad Administration under the bipartisan infrastructure law. I'll give some details on the various funding programs. First off, there are two small programs not included in the graphics. The Rail Research and Development Center of Excellence Grant Program. This program makes funding available to establish a center to advance research and development efforts that seek to improve the safety, performance, and sustainability of freight, intercity passenger, and commuter rail. $5 million has been awarded to a consortium of universities led by the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign to establish the National University Rail Center of Excellence. Next, the Corridor Identification and Development Program, also known as Corridor ID or CID, is the other program not included on the appropriations and awards graphics. The Corridor Identification and Development Program is a comprehensive intercity passenger rail planning and development program that will help guide intercity passenger rail development throughout the country and create a pipeline of intercity passenger rail projects ready for implementation. $34.5 million have been awarded to further study various intercity passenger rail projects around the country. And we are hoping that further rounds of funding will be made available under this program. The Restoration and Enhancement Grant Program, also known as R&E, this program funds grants for initiating, restoring, or enhancing intercity passenger rail transportation. So far, $146 million has been awarded. The Rail Crossing Elimination Grant Program, also known as RCE, this program provides funding for highway rail or pathway rail grade crossing improvement projects that focus on improving the safety and mobility of people and goods. So far, $1.7 billion has been awarded. The Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvements Program, also known as CRISI, this program provides funding for projects that improve the safety, efficiency, and reliability of intercity passenger and freight rail. So far, $3.9 billion has been awarded. The Fed-State Partnership for Intercity Passenger Rail Grant Program, also known as Fed-State or FSP, this program provides funding for capital projects that reduce the state of good repair backlog, improve performance, or expand or establish new intercity passenger rail service, including privately operated intercity passenger rail service if an eligible applicant is involved. This program consists of two pools, Fed-State Partnership National and Fed-State Partnership Northeast Corridor. The prior graphics showing the appropriations and awards label the Fed-State Partnership Northeast Corridor as Amtrak. So far, $8.1 billion has been awarded through Fed-State Partnership National, and $14 billion has been awarded to Amtrak through Fed-State Partnership Northeast Corridor. It's important to mention that the Corridor ID and Fed-State partnership programs were designed to work in concert with each other. The Corridor ID program provides funding to study new intercity passenger services and improvements and expansions to existing intercity passenger rail services, while the Fed-State Partnership Program provides funding for the capital costs to implement new services and improvements and expansions to existing services. Now, for the moment you've all been waiting for, the bottom of the list. A couple side notes. My analysis covers all 50 states and the District of Columbia, so the rankings are out of 51 rather than 50. Also, there were some large awards that span state boundaries, which I split among the various states involved. However, small awards that span more than one state, like the $500,000 Corridor ID Awards, I assigned to the state that was the primary applicant because the amounts were small enough that it wouldn't have made a difference in the rankings. First off, there were two states not receiving any bipartisan infrastructure law funding through the Federal Railroad Administration. With almost 1.5 million residents, Hawaii ranks number 40 in population. Since the state is comprised of islands, it lacks the mainline railroads that would take advantage of this kind of funding. With just over 1 million residents, Rhode Island ranks number 44 in population. While the nation's smallest state and area did not directly receive any funding under these programs, it does lie along Amtrak's Northeast Corridor and will receive benefits from the funding awarded to Amtrak. With Hawaii and Rhode Island out of the way, we can get to the bottom of the list. With just over 2 million residents, Idaho ranks number 38 in population. With 51 million in awards, it ranks number 39 on the list. Idaho's awards consist exclusively of railroad crossing elimination funding. With over 1.7 million residents, West Virginia ranks number 39 in population. With 46 million in awards, it ranks number 40 on the list. West Virginia's awards consist of almost 4 million in railroad crossing elimination funding and 42 million in CRISI funding. With just under 1 million residents, South Dakota ranks number 46 in population. With 41 million in awards, it ranks number 41 on the list. South Dakota's awards consist of almost 17 million in railroad crossing elimination funding and almost 25 million in CRISI funding. With a bit over 500,000 residents, Vermont ranks number 50 in population. With 30 million in awards, it ranks number 42 on the list. Vermont's awards consist of two Corridor ID awards to study the Green Mountain Corridor and the Vermonter Corridor, and 29 million in CRISI funding. With just over 1 million residents, Montana ranks number 43 in population. With 25 million in awards, it ranks number 43 on the list. Montana's awards consist of one Corridor ID award to study bringing passenger rail back to southern Montana, almost 4 million in rail crossing elimination funding, 6 million in CRISI funding, and almost 15 million in Fed-State partnership funding awarded to Amtrak. Side note, the National Railroad Passenger Corporation is Amtrak's official name. With just over 1 million residents, Delaware ranks number 45 in population. With almost 23 million in awards, it ranks number 44 on the list. Delaware's awards consist of one Corridor ID award to study the Diamond State Line, 1 million in railroad crossing elimination funding, 6 million to Amtrak for a maintenance training program, and over 14 million to the University of Delaware for a railroad workforce center. With just over 3 million residents, Arkansas ranks number 33 in population. With just under 20 million in awards, it ranks number 45 on the list. Arkansas's awards consist of 2.5 million in railroad crossing elimination funding and 17 million in CRISI funding. With over 6 million residents, Missouri ranks number 19 in population. With 16 million in awards, it ranks number 46 on the list. Missouri's awards consist of two Corridor ID awards, one to study extending the Chicago-Quincy, Illinois train to Hannibal, Missouri, and another to study a train connecting St. Joseph to Kansas City, almost 3 million in railroad crossing elimination funding, and almost 13 million in CRISI funding. With just under 1.5 million residents, New Hampshire ranks number 41 in population. With 14 million in awards, it ranks number 47 on the list. New Hampshire's awards consist of a small CRISI award for studying a bridge replacement and almost 14 million through the Fed-State partnership for improvements to the Downeaster corridor. With 3.5 million residents, Utah, my home state, ranks number 30 in population. With 12.5 million in awards, it ranks number 48 and next to dead last on the list. Utah's awards consist of almost 2 million in CRISI funding and almost 11 million in railroad crossing elimination funding. Side note, due to the embarrassment of Utah finishing next to dead last on this list, I have made another video on the LinkUtah channel that details the Utah Rail Passengers Association's ideas on what Utah needs to do to turn around its rail planning and rail investments. The link is in the description somewhere. With just over 500,000 residents, Wyoming has the smallest population in the nation and ranks number 51 in population. With 8 million in awards, it ranks number 49, dead last, on the list. Wyoming's awards consist of 2.5 million in railroad crossing elimination funding and almost 6 million in CRISI funding. With the bottom of the list out of the way, we can now move on to the top 10 award recipients. With almost 13 million residents, Illinois ranks number 6 in population. With almost 500 million in awards, it ranks number 10 on the list. Well, now we'll be seeing some bigger spreadsheets. Illinois' awards consist of 4 corridor ID awards for studying new services connecting Chicago and Peoria and Chicago and the Quad Cities, and for studying improvements to the Chicago to Carbondale and the Chicago to St. Louis corridors. Almost 13 million in restoration and enhancement funding for the Twin Cities to Chicago Borealis train. 93 million in funding to Amtrak for improvements to Chicago Union Station, almost 130 million in railroad crossing elimination funding, and 218 million for multiple CRISI projects throughout Illinois. With just over 13 million residents, Pennsylvania ranks number 5 in population. With more than 600 million in awards, it ranks number 9 on the list. Pennsylvania's awards consist of 3 corridor ID awards for studying new services connecting Scranton and New York City and Reading and Philadelphia, and for studying improvements to the Pittsburgh to Philadelphia corridor. 16 million in rail crossing elimination funding, 95 million in CRISI funding, 143 million in Fed-state partnership funding for the Keystone Corridor improvements, and 407 million in Northeast Corridor Fed-state partnership funding going mainly towards Amtrak. With almost 9 million residents, Virginia ranks number 12 in population. With more than 800 million in awards, it ranks number 8 on the list. Virginia's awards consist of 2 corridor ID awards for studying the East-West Commonwealth Corridor and for studying an extension to Bristol, Virginia. 13 million in railroad crossing elimination funding, 122 million in CRISI funding, and 729 million in Fed-state partnership funding to the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority for passenger rail improvements between Washington, D.C. and Richmond. With 3.5 million residents, Connecticut ranks number 29 in population. With over $1 billion in awards, it ranks number 7 on the list. Connecticut's awards consist of 1 corridor ID award for studying the Hartford line, almost 3 million in railroad crossing elimination funding, 5 million in CRISI funding, 11 million in restoration and enhancement funding for the Hartford line, and over $1 billion in Northeast Corridor Fed-state partnership funding, with over 800 million of that going to Amtrak for the Connecticut River Bridge replacement. With 11 million residents, North Carolina ranks number 9 in population. With over $1.25 billion in awards, it ranks number 6 on the list. North Carolina's awards consist of 7 corridor ID awards for a variety of corridors around the state, almost 8 million in railroad crossing elimination funding, 14 million in restoration and enhancement funding for the Piedmont corridor, 136 million in CRISI funding, and over $1 billion in Fed-state partnership funding for restoring an abandoned rail line for passenger service between Raleigh and Richmond, Virginia. With over 3 million residents, Nevada ranks number 31 in population. With $1.5 billion in awards, it ranks number 5 on the list. Nevada is the outlier among the top 10 of the list since almost all of the funding is from 1 award. Nevada's awards consist of one corridor ID award for studying the Southern California to Las Vegas Brightline West and $1.5 billion in Fed state partnership funding for Brightline West. The total award to Brightline West was $3 billion, and I assigned the other half to California. With 9.5 million residents, New Jersey ranks number 11 in population. With $2.25 billion in awards, it ranks number 4 on the list. New Jersey's awards consist of just under 1 million in railroad crossing elimination funding, 63 million in CRISI funding, and over 2 billion in Northeast Corridor Fed state partnership funding going to Amtrak, mostly for the addition of 2 new tunnels going under the Hudson River into Penn Station in Manhattan. This was another large award that I split with half assigned to New Jersey and half to New York. With almost 20 million residents, New York ranks number 4 in population. With over $3.5 billion in awards, it ranks number 3 on the list. New York's awards consist of 3 corridor ID awards for studying an Amtrak extension to Ronkonkoma on Long Island and for improvements to the Adirondack and Empire corridors. 22 million in railroad crossing elimination funding, 287 million in CRISI funding, and over 3 billion in Northeast Corridor Fed State Partnership funding going to Amtrak, mostly for the Hudson River tunnels, but also for restoration of the East River tunnels. With almost 40 million residents, California ranks number 1 in population. With over 5 billion in awards, it ranks number 2 on the list. California's spreadsheet is so big I can't even read it, so I simplified it. California's awards consists of 7 corridor ID awards for a variety of corridors around the state, 27 million in restoration and enhancement funding for the San Diego, Los Angeles, San Luis Obispo corridor, 191 million in rail crossing elimination funding, $500 million in CRISI funding, and $4.5 billion in Fed state partnership funding for Brightline West and the California High-Speed Rail Authority. Hit pause if you want to see the spreadsheet zoomed in. Here's page 1, and here's page 2. With over 6 million residents, Maryland ranks number 18 in population. With over 7 billion in awards, it ranks number 1 on the list. Maryland's awards consist of almost 5 million in rail crossing elimination funding, 21 million in CRISI funding, and over 7 billion in Northeast Corridor Fed State Partnership funding going to Amtrak, mostly to the Susquehanna River Bridge replacement and the Baltimore and Potomac Tunnel replacement. Hopefully, this video has given you a better understanding of how 28 billion in funding has been awarded. Hopefully, these funding programs continue. Let me know in the comments if there are other things that you'd like me to take a deep dive into. As I mentioned earlier, I've made a separate video on the LinkUtah channel that details the Utah Rail Passengers Association's ideas on what Utah needs to do to turn around its rail planning and rail investments. A link to that video is in the description, but I'll also put it up on the end screen somewhere over here. I'm also going to throw some bloopers in at the end for your enjoyment. See you later. Recording in progress. Once again, I am talking to a camera. Talking again. The railroad crossing. Okay. Yeah, it's still the prior graphics. This program consists of two fulls. Yeah. We're going to start over with Vermont. Sorry, Biden. I messed up on Delaware. Okay, I messed up on Missouri too. Time to scratch my head. For the Connecticut River bit. Okay, see if we can do Connecticut right. Yeah. Yeah, finally got through Connecticut. Okay, just like New Jersey Transit, I am having difficulty going through New Jersey. And while I tripped over many other words, I was actually able to say Ronkonkoma on the first try with over 5 billion. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, we'll start on California again. Funding for the San Diego Los. Blah, blah. Okay. Okay, I'm going to pause. Recording in progress so that the data could. Blah, blah. Okay, starting that over. Back in, let's see, let me fix this. See you later.